Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here in the sports entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada, on PRConnectionRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian McKelly. And here on this show, we have done a lot about Henderson Silverman. We talked about the Savannah Ghost Pirates, the ECHL. We have gone over the UNLV Rebels hockey for college hockey. And even with junior hockey, we have the Las Vegas Thunderbirds. But the NHL farm system is a lot more complex. As a matter of fact, with the NHL farm system, every single team has one. Wow, shocking. No. But when it comes to the NHL farm system, who has the best farm system in hockey? Who has the best farm system out of all 32 teams in the NHL? And more importantly, where do your Vegas Golden Knights rank out of all 32 teams in the NHL? As a matter of fact, before we even start the rankings, go to the chat down below and put in the comments, where do you have the Vegas Golden Knights ranked in terms of farm system rankings? Do you think they're towards the bottom, around the middle, or are you someone who thinks they have the best farm system in all of hockey? You let me know. You comment down below before we start off this farm system ranking here on Vegas Hockey Hub, talking about the NHL farm system rankings for 2023. So we're going to start this out by going from the worst to the best, okay? And we are going to start out with an organization who, not despite the fact that has an older roster, but this is an organization that is not being built for the future, an organization who unfortunately has not been preparing itself in terms of farm systems, and as a matter of fact has the worst farm system in hockey, and that would be going to the Washington Capitals. I mean, look, you have LePerriere, Borkstrom, McMichael, Johansson. There is some solid talent with the Washington Capitals, but the problem with them is that majority of these guys are either 1 year away or multiple years away. These prospects aren't, ultimate first round talent. There isn't first round pick after first round pick after first round pick. As a matter of fact, there's certain players on this list that have been prospects for a couple of years now in the NHL. So it's taken a long time for two of these guys to become seasoned prospects. And that's something you don't really see in the modern NHL. So I will say, when it comes to the Washington Capitals, I am really curious to see how Connor McMichael does once he eventually does become a full-time NHLer. But yeah, the Washington Capitals right now would have the worst farm system in the NHL. It just really doesn't it really lacks substance. And when it comes to talent that could be ready today to play for the Washington Capitals, they just really do not have much in terms of players that I could see. Like I said, Connor McMichael, who was drafted 25th overall, he is someone who has had some limited experience and everything like that. But even then, he was a 25th overall pick in 2019. So as a 21-year-old, he still has some way to go. Now, next on the list, we have the Carolina Hurricanes. Yeah, the Carolina Hurricanes, who 3 or 4 years ago had the best, one of the best farm systems in all of hockey. Well, majority of that talent has eventually graduated to the NHL, and a good amount of the talent that you see on this screen have either already played select games in the NHL or, similar to Washington, are a few years away from being NHL ready. This is a Carolina Hurricanes team that, for example, I'm just going to point out Dominic Bach. He is a player for the Carolina Hurricanes that I could see eventually becoming a good player. But the thing about him, as 22 years old, a player they got from Germany, he was 25th overall. That was in the 2018 NHL draft. This is a guy who has 2 whole seasons in the AHL, has had 28 points as a AHL player. So this is someone who, despite being drafted first round in 2018, is still classified as a prospect because he has never played a game in the NHL. So for a 22-year-old from Germany, that'll be interesting to see what happens there. Ryan Suzuki, for any Golden Knights fans out there, yes, that is the brother of former Vegas Golden Knight first-round pick Nick Suzuki. Jack Drury, who is the son of former Colorado Avalanche Chris Drury. So the Carolina Hurricanes, they would be towards the bottom because, once again, majority of their prospects have already graduated and are now playing NHL hockey consistently. At 30th, we have from the Pittsburgh Penguins, and this situation is just unfortunate because there's majority of their prospects have already spent time in the NHL. And, Ty Smith, Alexander Nylander, these are guys who were former first-round picks. But, with the Pittsburgh Penguins, they just don't have a lot in terms of their system. As a matter of fact, when you talk about someone like Alexander Nylander, who, by the way, shout out to his brother and William Nylander, I mean, this is a guy who is on a one-year deal with the Pittsburgh Penguins. 24 years old, was drafted in the top 10 in 2016. And once again, he's just stuck in the minors. He's been doing that for the last 2 seasons, being in the AHL, despite being a top 10 pick. You also have Ty Smith, a defenseman, somebody that they brought over in a deal, 22 years old, former 17th overall pick in 2018, but yet has spent majority of this year in the AHL. So, the Pittsburgh Penguins are not really there in terms of what they have in terms of future prospects. At number 29, very similar to the Carolina Hurricanes, 2 teams above, the Colorado Avalanche. So many of their players are now NHLers. When you're talking about Cale Makar, when you're discussing Bowen Byram, oh man, so much of the talent that Colorado had that was once a top 5 farm system have now gotten their graduation and are now in the NHL. So, their depth and their pieces in the AHL and the ECHL and in junior hockey are just not there because the Colorado Avalanche have so many players who have graduated and are now in the NHL. Now, Shane Bowers is an interesting story. Shane Bowers, 28th overall in the 2017 NHL draft. Shane Bowers was part of the Matt Duchene trade back in November of 2017. When the Colorado Avalanche traded Matt Duchene to the Ottawa Senators, Shane Bowers was one of the prospects that came back in that deal. Interesting enough, Bowen Byram was also somebody that was in that trade as well as Shane Bowers. So, it's a situation where he has been stuck with the Colorado Eagles playing in the AHL. And for someone who was drafted in the first round of the 2017 NHL draft to have only played 1 game with the Colorado Avalanche, really disappointing for Shane Bowers. So I would say him, but the fact that 3 of the 5 players you see on your screen, Bowers, Kamenev, and Steinberg, the fact that they all came from the Matt Duchene trade in 2017, and none of them have really made contributions to the NHL when it comes to the situation in Colorado. So, to me, it's just fascinating to see how, Stenberg, how Kamenev, and how Bowers are going to contribute to Colorado eventually at some point. Kamenev at 26 years old right now playing in the KHL, and that's his current situation now. At number 28, we have a former President's Trophy winner team, and that is the Florida Panthers. So the only person that I would really spotlight with this situation is Alexei Hypniemi. Because with him, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens in Florida with that situation, because he is a player right now that has played a few games. He's had a cup of coffee in the NHL. This is a guy who has played 25 games in the NHL, 6 points in 25 games, but he has been mainly in Charlotte in the AHL for majority of this time. 40th overall pick back in 2017. So for somebody like him at 24 years old, for him to have only played 25 NHL games, had 10 games played this year already, he is somebody that could contribute long-term in Florida, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, speaking of Florida, at number 27, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning. Grant Mismash, him, Goncalves, and Fortier. These are players that could eventually contribute with Tampa Bay, but very similar to a couple of teams I've already said on this list. Tampa Bay has so many players in the NHL that their farm system has been depleted at this point in terms of future players. I mean, Gabriel Fortier, who was a second-round pick in 2018, he has only played 11 NHL games at 22 years of age. So when it comes to Gabriel Fortier, very similar to Hepniemi, who out there at the Florida Panthers I talked about earlier. It is a situation where he hasn't gotten enough ice time in the NHL. And at 22 years of age, it'll be interesting to see what he does for the future long term. At number 26, we have the Calgary Flames, who by far have one of the weakest prospect systems when it comes to the Pacific Division as a counterpart to the Vegas Golden Knights. Connor Zary, the center for the Calgary Flames, he would be my notable prospect for Calgary. Because when it comes to Connor, I would have to point out he was drafted 24th overall in the 2020 NHL draft. 21 years old. He was from Saskatoon. He has not played an NHL game yet, but has spent the past 3 seasons in the AHL. So for a 21-year-old who was drafted in the first round, we'll see how Connor Zary does with Calgary, but he would be my notable guy. At number 25, we have the New York Islanders, a team that's really focused on making a playoff run at this point. Very similar, by the way, to the majority of the guys I named that are towards the bottom of the prospect list. Maybe that's a connection there. We'll have to find out. But when it comes to the New York Islanders, man, Bodie Wild, the defenseman, he has some potential. I will point out, and I will give credit to Bodie Wild. The New York Islanders defenseman, the guy that they brought in to help out the defense when it comes to the New York Islanders, he was drafted in the second round in 2018 and has yet to play in the NHL. As a matter of fact, this is a guy who has split time between the AHL and the ECHL. Despite him having an amazing name for a NHL player, this is a guy who has really been floundering at 22 years of age between the ECHL and the AHL. And then at number 24, for anybody who guessed earlier in the show, at number 24, we have the Vegas Golden Knights. So for any Vegas Golden Knights fan, here's where your ranking was in the NHL farm system rankings. At center, you have Brendan Brisson, their former 2020 first-round pick. Their 2021 first-round pick, Zach Dean, afterwards. You have Danny Chaka, defenseman Caden Korzak, who's really become one of your best young players in Vegas. And you have Mateus Supalov. So when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights, you have a bunch of talent here, but the unfortunate situation why they're ranked 24th is they've had to gut a lot of their prospects in order to make a Stanley Cup run. So in order for Vegas to make a Stanley Cup push, they've had to sacrifice prospects to get it done. Brendan Brisson would be my notable player. Just like I'm doing for the rest of these teams. One person I would mention is Brendan Brisson, him being in the AHL, playing in Henderson right now. He is not performing at a level that a 2020 first-round pick should be. Maybe we'll see him play in the NHL someday, but right now, at this point in time, Brendan Brisson has not performed like an AHL-level player. He is not even playing like someone who could be in the NHL at some point. At number 23, we have the St. Louis Blues. And, with St. Louis, there really wasn't really much to pick here. Similar to a lot of teams on this list, the St. Louis Blues battling for a playoff spot year after year. Well, when you go to the trade deadline and you acquire players, you have to trade some of them. You have to get rid of players in order to get it done. Now, St. Louis being at 23. Number 22 would be the Philadelphia Flyers. Bobby Brink would be someone I got to mention real quick. So with Bobby Brink from the Philadelphia Flyers. This is a player who currently right now was drafted in the second round in 2019. 21 years old. He has had 10 games in the NHL, but he has mainly been in the college hockey, playing for University of Denver. Had a little bit of time in the AHL for Lehigh Valley. But for a 21-year-old, someone drafted in the second round, Bobby Brink, the right wing, he would be someone you got to watch out for in Philadelphia. If he eventually plays more games in the NHL, he'd be someone on the bottom six to watch out for. Number 21, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Well, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the situation here is very similar to a lot of the teams I've mentioned so far. They're trying to win a championship. They want to win a Stanley Cup in the NHL. But in order for them to do that, their prospect pool is underwhelming. Their prospect pool is not what they're worrying about right now. They're worried about Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, John Tavares winning a Stanley Cup. So for Toronto being at 21, it makes a lot of sense when you understand that aspect. Very similar to number 20, the Boston Bruins. This is a Boston Bruins team that you have Michael DiPietro, who you got in a trade from the Vancouver Canucks. John Beecher, someone that they also have in their system right now. But with the Boston Bruins, they have the best record in the NHL. So at number 20, it's not surprising to see how the Boston Bruins do not have a great farm system at this point. At number 19, you have the Edmonton Oilers. Edmonton Oilers, Tyler Benson, Oliver Rodrigue. You have Luka Metzenberger. The Edmonton Oilers right now, Connor McDavid, Zach Hyman, their talent right now is based off of getting to the playoffs. You probably have picked up on this theme at this point in time. Majority of the teams I have mentioned, they are not trying to win they're not trying to win prospects right now. They're trying to win a Stanley Cup. Number 18, the Chicago Blackhawks. I'll give credit where credit is due. Frank Nazar will be a really good player for them, but because the Chicago Blackhawks neglected rebuilding for the longest time, now it's eventually caught up to them. They have the worst record in hockey and only number 18 ranking in terms of farm systems to show for it. Eventually, they'll turn that around over time, but as of right now, their negligence of trying to not do a rebuild has really affected Chicago now long term. Number 17, we have the best record in the Western Conference in the Dallas Stars, the number 1 seed in the West right now. Number 2 would be the Vegas Golden Knights as of this recording. And you know what? The Dallas Stars makes a lot of sense when you comprehend that, Thomas Harley, Riley Tuft, they have a few guys there, but there really isn't much that you really talk about. It's mainly depth now with the Dallas Stars organization. At number 16, let's go to New York. Let's talk about the New York Rangers. Gerard Gallant and that system that's being built in New York. They really care about going out and winning a championship. They were at the Eastern Conference Finals not even a year ago. So majority of their prospects are either players currently in the AHL or players in junior hockey who are a few years away. Number 15, the Vancouver Canucks. Jet Wu, shout out to that right there. But the Vancouver Canucks are in a weird limbo right now where the Vancouver Canucks are bad and are selling off assets at the trade deadline. So this list is definitely going to change over time. But as of right now, the Vancouver Canucks are average. They are at number 15 when it comes to prospects. Number 14, the Nashville Predators, a team that's slowly starting a rebuild. I will say Fedor Shekrev. He is a center right now, a good player that's up and coming for Nashville. He'll be someone that'll be on that team in the future. But yeah, Nashville, they're around the top 15. Not bad for Nashville. At number 13, we have a team that's above Vegas in their division, and that is the San Jose Sharks. I will give credit to Philippe Bystedt because he will be a guy that will eventually contribute to San Jose. Cameron Lund is going to be someone you have to watch out for. But yeah, the San Jose Sharks having 2 up-and-coming guys, and they have a few players in the top 100 prospect list on their roster. So San Jose is a team that over a couple of years is eventually going to finish that rebuild, and they're going to be a good team overall. Now at number 12, we have a team that was the number 1 farm system not even that long ago. They have dropped to number 12 in the 2023 NHL farm system ranking because so many of their guys graduated to the main roster. Quentin Byfield, for example, he is someone that has eventually been promoted. But, Alex Turcotte, you have, Elias Anderson, Brant Clark, Tobias Bornfoot, and you have Arthur Koliev as well. So when it comes to Los Angeles Kings being at number 12, it's not a bad thing, but expect them to eventually go lower and lower on this list. The LA Kings right now have the 3rd best record in the Western Conference, the 2nd best record in the Pacific. So the LA Kings, I expect them to trade one of these guys at the trade deadline if I had to do a hunch on that. Number 11, let's go over to the Minnesota Wild. Shout out to Marco Rossi, by the way, Jesper Wallstedt, and Carson Lambos. The Minnesota Wild are in an interesting position. You have a veteran goalie in Marc-Andre Fleury. You have Philippe Gustafsson, who's a young goalie under Marc-Andre Fleury to eventually replace Fleury as their goalie. But the Minnesota Wild having, Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy, this team does have a bright future, and I think having the number 11 farm system has a lot to do with that. At number 10, the Arizona Coyotes, Logan Cooley has had a good performance in World Juniors. Dylan Gunther has been the same way. Victor Soderstrom, Connor Geekie. I mean, there's a good amount of talent with the Arizona Coyotes. I guess the main question's got to be, will they develop at the NHL level? Because the Arizona Coyotes have been known for having top farm systems, but it's always been about can they develop and eventually transition into good players in the NHL. So at number 10, the Arizona Coyotes. At number 9, the Montreal Canadiens, the iconic, the legacy, the historic team in the NHL. You know what? Owen Beck, Emil Henemainen. But the Montreal Canadiens, I will give credit where credit is due. The Montreal Canadiens, in less than 2 seasons, have really developed their farm system, have really turned it around in Montreal. You already have Cole Caulfield, Kirby Dach. You have Nick Suzuki out there as your young core in the NHL. And hopefully these guys on the board, they can eventually help the Montreal Canadiens become a playoff team once again with the core I mentioned in the NHL. At number 8, the Winnipeg Jets, the only team I think on this list that you would say is a playoff contender at this point. The Winnipeg Jets, Brad Lambert, you have Christian Reichel. I mean, the Winnipeg Jets do have some good talent in their farm system that are waiting to get promoted to the NHL. And, with the Winnipeg Jets, this is a team that could become a good playoff contender. And I will say a few of these guys will translate and eventually transition over to the NHL at some point either this year or next year. At number 7, the Columbus Blue Jackets, a team that is in absolute disarray. Hopefully this farm system can help them out. Shout out to Joshua Dunn, by the way. He'd be a prospect I'd have to watch out for. And when it comes to Columbus at number 7, give them some time. Give them some seasoning, about 3 to 4 seasons. Johnny Gaudreau is still your face of the franchise. And I say the Columbus Blue Jackets by 2026, maybe 2027, will be a team that will be scary to watch. Now, a team that's scary to watch now in 2022, 2023 is number 6, and that's the New Jersey Devils. I mean, the New Jersey Devils have graduated so many players to the NHL, like Jack Hughes. I mean, there's some good talent that they have brought over, like Nico Hoyscher. But, man, Luke Hughes, Nolan Foote, Chase Stillman. I mean, the New Jersey Devils are going to have an interesting defense core with Simon Nemec and Luke Hughes as your defense of the future. You got, Dougie Hamilton and Ryan Graves in the NHL, and then you add those two to your defense core. Watch out for the New Jersey Devils eventually when those guys get called up, because the New Jersey Devils will have 4 of a really solid core on the defense. And then at the top 5, at number 5, we have the Detroit Red Wings, a team that is a semi-playoff contender this year. No doubt that when it comes to Simeon Edvinsson and Marco Kasper, Sebastian Cossa, William Wallander, this is a team in Detroit that will eventually become a playoff team. Steve Yzerman's done really well at building young talent. Obviously, we've seen with Lucas Raymond and with Moritz Seider that those two players have transitioned well into the NHL. The couple of these guys will eventually join in Detroit. At number 4, the Ottawa Senators, a team that's been rebuilding for the last 4 or 5 years. And you know what? Tyler Boucher, Jacob Bernard-Docker. You have Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris. There is good talent already in the NHL. And 3 of these 5 guys are currently in the minors and have played some minutes in the NHL. So when they become a full-time NHL player, expect Ottawa to eventually turn it around. I say 2024, 2025, that will be a time Ottawa will start to be a contender once again in the NHL. And then our top 3 for NHL farm system rankings for 2023. And number 3, we have a team that's tanking for Connor Bedard, but they still have a pretty good farm system as of right now. You have Zellweger, you have Tracy, you have Perreault. This is a team in Anaheim that already has Trevor Zegras, Troy Terry, Mason McTavish is already going to be there. So the Anaheim Ducks adding a few of these assets to the NHL, they will be a definitive good team in the NHL. And if you get Connor Bedard, I say that you would eventually be a playoff contender in the NHL if you add someone like him, a generational talent, plus a few of the guys you have listed right here. At number 2, we have a second-year franchise in the Seattle Kraken, a team that really has developed their farm system instead of developing their players right away. The Seattle Kraken did the opposite of the Vegas Golden Knights. The Vegas Golden Knights had a bunch of NHL-ready talent already in their team. Seattle Kraken have really been building from the NHL draft. Riker Evans, Shane Wright, you have Jandy Naiman. This is a team in Seattle that I believe, despite them already being a playoff team, give them 2 or 3 years, and don't be surprised if Seattle becomes a championship contender in the NHL. Ron Francis and the management in Seattle, they know how to scout for talent. They understand that in order to get talent to come to Seattle, they had to draft from within, and they have to build the team from start. So I will say for the Seattle Kraken, give them about 2025, 2026, and do not be surprised if the Seattle Kraken are competing for a Western Conference final. I wouldn't be shocked if Seattle Kraken have a little bit of a run here with all the young talent that's being eventually called up to the NHL. But at number 1, there's no doubt in my mind that the Buffalo Sabres have the number 1 ranked farm system in hockey. Not only do they have 6 players ranked in the top 100 prospects, but you also have the Buffalo Sabres, who had number 1 overall pick Owen Power, who's been called up to the NHL. You also had Rasmus Dahlin, who's been called up to the NHL. You have players like Tage Thompson, Alex Tuch, a bunch of players who were former prospects who are now on the NHL roster. JJ Barretka. There are these good talent like Jack Quinn, for example. So the Buffalo Sabres have a sane amount of talent already in their system. And then you have Oslin, you have Kulich, Johnson, Savoy. This is a Buffalo Sabres team that is really going to be an elite squad in a few years. So that was our farm system rankings for the NHL. Let me know if you agree or disagree down below. And until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. Continue watching hockey, go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go.